Hello, I'm Sudeep Mitra, and welcome to the presentation of modified cold boot attack on Raspberry Pi. Cold boot attack targets a victim's system memory by exfiltrating memory contents and extracting private data from it. Random access memory, or RAM, is an integral part of computers where data and instructions are stored during runtime. Encryption keys are also stored in plaintext as RAM is volatile memory, that is, it loses all its contents once power is removed. However, the contents do not disappear immediately. In fact, RAM can retain its contents for a short time after power has been removed, as seen in the figure on the right, which depicts the decay rate of data in two DDR2 memory modules. The decay is gradual, not instant, which of course is a security risk demonstrated by researchers. Additionally, researchers have shown that RAM can retain data far longer in very cold temperatures. So how does cold boot attack steal contents from the memory, and how does prolonging data retention help the attacker? So oh, in cold boot attack, an attacker might power off the target device and reboot the machine into a USB or network boot from an imaging tool that will copy the RAM contents. Alternatively, an attacker might physically remove the RAM modules and temporarily install it into their machine to steal RAM data. As the module is cut off from the power in either scenario for some time, the attacker uses a off-the-shelf compressed air canister to freeze the RAM in order to extend the data retention period. Internet of Things, or IoT, refers to a collection of interconnected devices that sense and interact with its environment to provide tailored, sophisticated, and automated services. IoT devices have some unique characteristics when compared to traditional computers. These devices are often deployed in remote locations where it has to be battery powered. Therefore, these devices have to be very energy efficient. IT devices are resource constrained in terms of processing capabilities, speed, and memory. Another key aspect is the scale of an IoT network. Manufacturing facility may deploy several thousand IoT sensor nodes throughout their production line for extensive monitoring. So the cost has to be low, as at these scales every cent matters. Moreover, remote locations where physical access to devices unrestricted make these devices especially vulnerable to physical attacks, such as cold boot attack. Now let's see what solutions researchers have proposed to defend against a cold boot attack and how they don't work for IoT devices. Memory scrambling is a feature added to later generations of memory modules like DDR3 and 4, but researchers have shown that the scramblers can be easily defeated. Another solution is to employ full memory encryption, but it incurs energy and performance penalties, both of which are undesirable in IoT contexts. Some researchers have proposed CPU-bound cryptography, where cryptographic elements are stored in CPU registers in cache. However, given the low-end hardware in IoT, this too is not feasible. Moreover, this solution doesn't protect other private data like recently accessed files or browser activity. Dedicating a coprocessor has the same issues. It is expensive, and draws more energy. Another solution is to build circuitry into the chip so that memory is wiped on every boot. This way, the RAM will be clear and the attacker won't be able to extract any useful information. This solution has minimum energy and performance overhead, but it is a hardware solution that is not backward compatible with all the billions of IoT devices out in the field, making them vulnerable to attacks such as cold boot attack. Therefore, IoT needs a unique solution that incurs virtually no cost, no energy or performance overhead, and a software solution that can be easily dispersed throughout a distributed IoT network. Another thing um, that we have to keep in mind is how diverse and heterogeneous the IoT network is. So the solution has to be able to facilitate or protect most IoT devices. Now that we've seen how cold boot attack works and why IoT devices are especially vulnerable to such attacks, let's replicate cold boot attack on a Raspberry Pi single board computer. Raspberry Pi Zero W is a small form factor single board computer representative of IoT devices. It has a Broadcom BCM2835 SoC, a single-core RM11 processor clocked at 1 GHz, around half a gigabyte of RAM, which is stacked on top of the SoC, a removable SD card slot where the OS image is located, and it runs a modified Debian distribution. As the RAM chip is soldered on, it is not possible to physically remove it from the board, but the SD card is removable. An attacker with physical access can easily swap out the victim's SD card with their own and steal the RAM contents with a lightweight imaging tool. For this experiment, OS vulnerabilities are not considered, so RAM exfiltration by exploiting a compromised OS is out of the scope. It is also assumed that the attacker does not have root privileges in the victim's OS and they have physical access to the victim's Raspberry Pi. One component to mounting this attack is to figure out how to copy the entire memory into a file. For Linux machines, the easiest way to obtain physical RAM contents is through memfile under dev. However, since it's obviously a vulnerability, most Linux distributions have severely restricted access to this file, and some have even removed it completely. For example, if you wanted to copy dev memfile in Ubuntu 2004, you would be greeted with operation not permitted error. The small amount of memory copied into a file reveals no useful information to attackers. I was expecting the same from Raspberry Pi OS and thinking of convoluted ways of dumping the memory. And to my surprise, the OS let me dump the entire physical memory into a file. The Raspberry Pi OS lets unrestricted access to DevMem file if you have root privileges. Therefore, it is trivial to perform a memory dump with root privilege. The steps to mount cold boot attack is depicted in the figure on the left. First, the attacker freezes the top surface of the RAM by spraying compressed air while holding the can upside down. The leftmost USB connector is the power input on the Raspberry Pi board as seen in the picture on the right. Attacker quickly removes power from the board, pulls out the victim's SD card, and inserts their SD card where attacker has root privileges. The attacker SD card contains a lightweight version of Raspberry Pi OS called Raspberry Pi OS Lite. The dd command seen in the previous slide to copy the devmem file is appended to the bash rc file, which runs immediately after the system has rebooted. Once copying is done, the attacker can shut down the board and reboot into the victim's SD card. Attacker's SD card now has the memory dump file from the victim's system RAM, thereby successfully exfiltrating RAM contents from a victim's machine. Welcome to my modified cold boot attack on a Raspberry Pi. To simulate the victim accessing some secret files, I'm gonna run this command. I'm gonna access this file one more time just to make sure. And now we're gonna launch the attack. So now I'm gonna freeze the RAM surface with the compressed air canister. And now quickly yank the power out, take the SD card out, and put this back in and repower this board. And it's gonna start to boot up. And it's going to take some time to copy the files from the RAM as well. Now it's copying the files. The copy command is in the bash rc file, appended to the bash rc file, so that's the first thing it does after booting up. So after it has copied the contents of the RAM, it's gonna show how long it took and basically how many megabytes of files it has copied, which in this case should be around half a megabyte. So on average it takes about 47 seconds, so under a minute. Now it's done. To demonstrate the effectiveness of the attack, a file was created and some dummy secrets were inserted into the file. The file was then accessed. This is to simulate the victim accessing some secret file containing plaintext keys or private data. This is shown in the top figure. At this point, the cold boot attack was launched and the attacker obtained a snapshot of victim's RAM at this instance. On attacker's Ubuntu machine, as seen in the bottom picture, it is demonstrated that the secret data is successfully extracted from the memory dump with grep command. Now that the attacker has full control and access of victim's memory, let's see if some keys can be extracted from this memory dump. So potential keys were extracted from the memory dump. A simple dictionary attack was used to copy words and phrases that can be keys. The popular password cracking word list, RockU, has over 14 million common passwords. If a word in the memory dump matches one from the RockU word list, the word is saved into a file as a potential key. As the RockU word list is enormous, a truncated word list was used for demonstration purposes. As it can be seen in the pictures, The matches from both files were copied into a potential key file for further analysis. Memory forensics frameworks such as volatility can be used to search for passwords more efficiently, but the project requirements mentions not to use tools, so a simple method to extract passwords was demonstrated. Next, a simple bash script was written for extracting hash digests from the memory dump. The script simply extracts words that appear to be message digests and then are copied into a file for further analysis. Observing the memory dump, it is noticeable that there are at least three hashing algorithms used in Raspberry Pi: MD5, SHA-1, and SHA-256. So the script looks for values that appear to be either MD5 or SHA-1 or SHA-256 message digests, and it copies them into separate files for further analysis. After extracting the hash digests, one can use tools like Hashcat to find the plain text keys with a powerful machine. Apart from keys, browser activity, network traffic, files on mounted devices are also visible from the memory dump. On an average, it takes around 47 seconds to copy the RAM out of 100 test runs. The power off time was varied to see how long memory retains information, and it was roughly about a minute until the memory contents started to degrade. However, it's not a comprehensive experiment. One of the highlights from this experiment is to find how much IoT devices lag behind traditional computers in terms of security considerations. A potential vulnerability that was fixed long ago in desktop environments is still present in the latest Raspberry Pi operating system. Overall, cold boot attack has been demonstrated to be very effective in terms of exfiltrating user private information. And it is also very cheap and doesn't take too much time to perform. The way everything is set up, this might not work every time. So you might have to run the attack sometime to get the results. So there's some trial and error involved. In conclusion, the attack is effective on Raspberry Pi, and private data from the Raspberry Pi can be easily extracted without much effort. Unique characteristics of IoT devices such as low power, low computational resources, and low cost means that solutions that work for traditional computers may not be feasible in IoT context. Moreover, due to remote location where these devices are deployed, an attacker has unrestricted physical access to perform a cold boot attack. Overall, the attack was successful. It is very cheap to perform, and it doesn't take too much time either. That's the end of this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at this address. And thank you for listening.